Hello and welcome to the Green Machine Podcast, your Irish football news and nostalgia. I'm Nick, your host for today, and on today's show, we are delighted to be joined by former Shamrock Rovers, Dunfermline, Aberdeen, Oldham, Inverness, St Johnstone, Darlington, Hungerford Town, Egham Town, Horsham, and Ireland B international Richie Byrne. I'm also joined by Martin. Who did you play for, Martin?
Oh, Hendon. There you go. Put me down as Hendon.
Right,
I
okay.
didn't really. I'll say that.
Richie, did I miss anyone there?
I think you got them all in there.
Oh.
You didn't get Stella Maris and Belvedere before.
Yeah, well, I suppose we have to give them a nod. Hopefully John Giles isn't listening. He wouldn't be too impressed with that. Now, Richie retired in 2015. Am I right in saying that?
Well, I retired from professional football in about 2010, and I was out for 2 years, and then I got back in playing a bit of part-time because a scout actually that one of the kids I was coaching asked me to get out and train with his team, and they ended up dragging me back in, so I ended up playing a couple of seasons.
You just had the love. You just had the love, and you've done quite a bit in between. I mean, you wait for B license. You're a personal trainer. You're in the gym at the moment, which is commitment to the cause, isn't it? And you're also a strength and conditioning coach. And recently, you were appointed to. Will we mention it, Martin?
Yeah, go on.
You have my permission.
Yeah.
Okay. Richie's working for Arsenal. He's working for the Arsenal women as an S&C coach. So congratulations on that, Richie. We've been tracking you a little bit on social media, and you know your stuff, and you've been rewarded with that. So congratulations on the new role. How are you finding it so far?
It's great. I really like it. The girls are great crack, and there's a big change in terms of female football over the last couple of years, and Arsenal are at the forefront of that.
Yes.
There's a guy from Tipperary called Paddy Roach, and I only met him there the other day, and what a guy. So he is excellent, I have to say. Yeah. And he's revolutionizing training from the young athlete all the way through to the elite performer that plays in the first team. He's done it with the young guys, and now he's moving into the ladies and the women's football. He's a great guy, very knowledgeable and a great attitude. So it's a pleasure to work under someone like that, because they're always trying to do their best for the player, and that's my sort of belief. No matter what the club says or whoever says, you got to do your best for the player. And it's a fantastic opportunity to be in working with this club at the moment, so I'm really happy with it.
Are you an Arsenal fan, Richie?
I am not. I'm a Man United supporter. And if my granddad seen me wearing this Arsenal kit, I think he'd probably tackle me like a Roy Keane, Alfie Inga Haaland tackle, Yeah. So
you took the soup, Richie. You took the soup, but look, we won't hold it against you. Well, what do you reckon, Martin? Maybe little. Jerry Flannery was with Arsenal, wasn't he? As S&C.
There's been a lot of Irish guys there over the last few years. So it seems to be a thing that we get a lot of Irish guys coming out from the rugby side and then coming into the football side of it.
Yeah.
There's a huge gap in the market in terms of football strength and conditioning. And with the appointment of Des Ryan from the Irish Rugby, they brought it across, and he's done very well. And I only heard the other day the Irish Rugby system has they've devised a pathway going from youth rugby all the way through to the first team. This is what you have to do at each stage. And funny enough, who they got in was a guy who revolutionized football training in Canada, a fellow called Ishvan Bali. And the FA actually used his teachings to do their A license, B license, and all the ones below. He actually came in and worked with the Irish GAA and the Irish Rugby, and that's how Ireland are so good at the moment.
Yes,
because they literally have a system that works like clockwork. And if you bring that over to football, that's what you'll get. You'll churn out better athletes who then have the ability to become better players because they're available to train more often, and they're available to improve. So there was a bit of information there that I heard the other day that there's not one Premier League player that has had an ACL injury pre their Premier League career.
Wow.
So it goes to show you, if you get an ACL injury as a young lad, you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
Because the injury is too severe. Right? So guys, now you look at Virgil van Dijk, he's not the same.
Yes, yeah,
Now,
yeah.
imagine he was 18 and that happened. His development, he'd be out for 2 years. So he's losing 2 years of development. And that's what we're seeing with Arsenal. They're keeping these young, fast, strong guys fit, and they're not breaking down. And that enables them to develop through them years. So that's why they have so many quick players now. Years ago, you didn't have that many quick elite footballers. Why? Because the training systems broke them all and damaged them when they were young.
It was all running, wasn't it? It was just doing laps. Doing laps, yeah.
Think of your warm-up when you ever played football.
Yeah, yeah.
Think of your pre-season. Constant runs.
I never turned up, Richie.
Yeah. You must have played for someone else like Pats or something like that. Or the other fellas. Well, very unfit teams.
So Martin, I know you've a lot of interest in the SSC, and obviously, Martin, you spoke with David Roach last year. But Richie, I think it's important to mention your career because you've had one of the more obscure careers, and I mean, you're a cult hero at Aberdeen, but Oldham. I mean, I heard that you're the best Irish left back to play for Oldham since Dennis Irwin.
Probably the slowest Irish left back to play for Oldham. I couldn't run by the time I got there.
Yeah, no, yeah. Oh, but look, you done quite well. Here's one for you. Did you play under Stan at Darlington?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Right. How was that?
Do you know what? It's mad because the media and other people always have their own take on things and portray people in a certain manner, right?
Yes.
And when you're there with the person, it's a million miles from what you ever thought.
Yeah.
You know, like Stan was great crack. And the player I was very aggressive, and you know, I was sort of known for smashing people. And Stan actually got me in because he had a load of guys that they were bottom of the league, a load of soft players, a load of players complaining about running, didn't want to run, you know. And at Aberdeen, if you didn't run, get out.
Yeah.
Right. So I was used to running, you know. Now bear in mind, I'd half a hamstring, right? I'd one of my hamstrings not even connected, right? And I'm doing more running than half of these fellas, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, what am I looking at here? And Stan would lose his head, right? And he pulls us all. He had about 5 Irish lads there, 4 or 5 Irish lads. He pulls us in. He says, look, lads, I need you to just go around and start smashing these fellas because they're too soft. So we gave me the green light. That was it. I had the green light to do whatever I wanted. So in training, I was going through people, you know, and he loved it. But Stan would join in the possession box, right? And you sort of forget who he played for.
Yeah. Oh, he's class. Class player.
When Liverpool were Liverpool.
Yeah.
Right? He never lost the ball. I'd never seen him lose the ball once in the possession box, right? So then we were practicing corner kicks, and the boys are messing it, shanking it all over the place, and he's standing there, and you can see him losing his patience. And he goes, come here and I'll show you how to do it. And he went over. I swear to God, I've never seen anything like it. He whipped this thing, and he did about 6 in a row, right? Right onto the attacker's head. And everyone's just like, holy Jesus, that's mad, you know. And, you know, he's a great guy, super nice guy, really friendly. And I was having a lot of off-the-field problems with me son's mother at the time. And he was great. He was like, look, when you need to go up, you get the young fella, bring him down. We'll give you a house, stay in the house. I was in the house with 3 or 4 of the boys. Said, stay there with the lads, bring the young fella down, no problem.
Brilliant.
He was great. He was a diamond guy, you know, and he liked to point as well, you know. So
I heard that, yeah.
I can't say anything wrong about him. And you know, I remember the time people are slagging him on that gaffer and all this. Look, he's a great guy, and half the time I actually now think some footballers are just too soft. And they can't take harshness. You know, and they can't take responsibility. And a lot of lads like to shirk responsibility. Oh, it's the manager's fault, oh, it's the training, oh, it's this, oh, it's that. You know, look at yourself and do the hard work, you know. And a lot of lads just don't want to work hard, you know. Yeah,
it's a good approach. Get the Irish to kick the shit out of the English lads, basically. I mean, it's no harm. Sorry. It's no harm.
You know, once he's okay with that, I'd do anyone. So it didn't matter. It didn't matter where they were from. You know.
Oh, brilliant stuff. So Richie, a little bit of trivia for you. And now I told Martin this off air. So I've been doing a lot of kind of digital journalism since I was about 15, 16. And the first ever article I did, I was on my work experience in Setanta Sports in 2007. And my first ever article, I shit you not, Richie, it was a match report on Ireland B versus Scotland B. Who scored?
No way.
I swear to God, 2007, I was sitting up in Setanta. Scotland B and Ireland B had played. It was actually while I think Stan had just been sacked, I think.
Yeah.
And at the time, most of what I had to do was I had to look at the bookies and see who the favourites were for the Ireland job. And
Right.
it was and Trapattoni wasn't even on the radar. I think it was like Venables and a few other lads. But one of the days who said, "Look, Nick, we actually want you to write an article." And they said, "Look, the Ireland B played the Scotland B. Can you watch the match back and do like I think it was like a 150-word article?" And you know, I think I was tipping you for a senior call up, Richie. I mean, I was 15 or 16 at the time, but yeah, that was my first one. So I always have that little bit of a gra for you, Richie. That little bit of a gra. Tell us what you remember about that one, because that must have been a great honor to represent your country and to score in that one game.
Yeah, that's bittersweet. That's a huge story. Like, I'd need an hour to talk about everything around that. There's so many different bits to that story. It's mad. Where do I start? You know, I actually played that game with the hamstring injury. So I'd had my hamstring injury. I recently found out when I came to London, well, not recently, but a few years ago, a couple of years after I retired, that the hamstring wasn't even attached. So out of your 3 hamstrings on each leg, I'd one missing, not attached on that other leg, and 2 of them are working, and they were overworking. And then the other 3, they started overworking. I was all over the shop. But anyway, I played that game. I got back and I was working with a trainer. I went back to my trainer in Dublin, a fella called John Connor, he was looking after Conor McGregor and all the boys. So I'd go home and see him and then come back, get really strong and all the stuff that was going with that. And then I go back and I was working with a PT in Scotland as well. So I do my training there. So I was doing everything I could to try and get back, not knowing that my hamstring wasn't even attached. You know, thinking, and the physio there telling me it was in my head, and the doctors not knowing what they were looking at, and they didn't get a scan. And anyway, I get the call up for it. So I play a few games. I play about 10 games in a row, and someone got injured. And when I was at Dunfermline, I was on standby for the first team, so they knew about me.
Yeah.
And John O'Shea was ahead of me for left back. So I'd met John on the Irish 21s, and I've been around the guys a few times. And look, I knew I was nowhere near John O'Shea's standard, but I knew I was a great defender, and I was very aggressive and I had a lot of pace and power. And, when it comes to defending, I tip myself to be as good as any of them, right? But anyway, I got back, played a few games, and someone got injured. And Tony Cousins was working with Pat
Devlin, was it?
Pat Devlin.
Yeah.
And
we were only saying, Martin and I were like, who was the B coach? And I was like, I think it was Pat Devlin, but glad you confirmed it.
Yeah, so Pat Devlin, and Cuzzo rang me and says, Rich, any chance you come? Actually, I'll tell you what, he didn't even ring me. Was that one? No, it was Pat. Cuzzo rang me, and I was like, Cuzzo, how are you? He goes, Rich, you need to come down and play for Ireland. You're on the B squad. Come on, we've had an injury. I couldn't believe it. So anyway, went down, and I was on the bench, and then Glenn Whelan got injured.
Yeah. So
Glenn got injured, come off, and he goes, Rich, warm up. You're in left back. I was thinking, what? Glenn's a centre midfielder. Anyway, he pushed what's his name forward from left back into left midfield. Stephen Ward.
Yeah.
Stephen Ward.
Yeah.
Stephen Ward. He put Wardy up into left midfield, and I went into left back. And I have to say, I thought I played very well in that game.
Got your goal.
Got the goal. Do you remember the goal?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I remember watching it back because they had the footage or whatever. And was it in Kilmarnock or it was in Scotland anyway?
It was in Airdrie's ground.
Yeah.
So Mark Yates, that used to play for Tottenham, chopped inside. I actually underlapped him. Yeah. He took a shot. Yatesy had a mad shot. He took a shot from about 40 yards. It hit the crossbar and came back out. And I just continued me run. I don't know why I was running in there, but I just kept running into space. And it came out, and I needed a cross on the volley to me right side, and I hit a right foot volley. Probably the only place you could have got it in, right in the bottom corner. And that was the goal. And I didn't know how to celebrate. It was unbelievable. But I couldn't believe I scored for Ireland. So anyway, But the gas thing about Ireland is on the way to the game, right? When you're on the way to the matches, they start playing all the rebel songs, right? So the whole bus will be bouncing.
Not
right?
not,
One of the
not
coaches-
anymore. Not
Yeah.
anymore.
But one of the coaches, what he do is, I can't remember his name. He put his hands on the bit where the bags go, and he'd start doing somersaults. He'd be bleeding, flipping around, and he'd be about 90. He'd about 90 years old. He'd doing somersaults, and all the lads would be singing and dancing. But do you know what? It was great. And then we got the goal, and I thought to myself, right, if I can stay fit, I have a chance of being bumped up into the first team. Because a lot of lads went in. Stephen Hunt was in the first team. John Walter was in the first team. Glenn Wardy got in. There was a load of them got in from that squad.
Like I've got the squad here. So like Colin Doyle played a couple of games, didn't he? Jim Goodwin got sent off in that game.
Yeah, he got sent off. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously he's gone into management with Aberdeen recently, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was sacked, unfortunately. Alex Bruce, Glenn,
Bruce, yes.
Glenn Whelan. You came on as a sub there. John Walters.
Yeah.
Yeah, John Walters, Stephen Hunt, Roy O'Donovan.
Roy,
Mark
Yates.
Do you remember Mark Yates? He was a great little player. He was a Spurs,
Unreal.
wasn't he? And Wes Houlihan. So like
Houlihan.
most of those lads went on to get full international caps, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then even
And
like the Scotland team there. Yeah, a few lads in the Scotland team. Chris Whitaker and a few lads like that. But yeah, good few went on, didn't they?
Yeah, and I thought if I had a stage fit, I think I would have played for Ireland, to be honest. And that's what I was saying about development, injury, and all that type of stuff. If you're not getting looked after, I feel I was mismanaged. The injury was mismanaged. It wasn't diagnosed properly, and the management wasn't right. And I didn't know anything about it. And there you go. That's what happens. And that's why I do what I do now. So I assess players now individually. So when I'm working in this gym, so we have all the Premier League testing equipment for muscle strength and all that type of stuff and movement screening. And I do that now for individual players. So people come to me, young lads come in, I do the assessment. I give them a program, say, look, you got to do this, this, and this. This is the issue. If I don't know, I have a top physio that looks after all the lads. He looks after Rio Ferdinand and Jamie Redknapp and all them. And I'll send them to him to be diagnosed, and then we know what we're dealing with then. So you have to go to the best of the best. You have to look to, you really got to know what's going on with these young players, because you lose too many players from injury. And I feel I'm one of them, I feel I could have gone on to do very well. I'm sitting and watching games now and I'm looking at some of the defending, I'd be pulling my hair out, thinking, no, I could have done that, So you tend to get a bit bitter, but you have to sort of learn to get over it and not dwell too much on it.
Absolutely. Is that why you got into S&C and personal training, Richie? Because like you're speaking very passionately about it, and were those experiences, playing with 2 out of 3 hamstrings, which sounds horrendous, by the way. Is that why you is that why you went down that route? Yeah,
well, I initially just wanted to fix myself, because I was thinking to myself, actually, I was telling the boys there the other day, we had a young physio student came in, and she pulled me to the side. She was around for about 6 weeks, and she was doing our work experience at the club in Aberdeen, and she pulled me to the side. She said, Rich, the way this is going, this is not how it's supposed to be done. She says, I don't like the sound of that injury. Now, she was only about 18, right?
Yeah.
I looked at her and I said, what are you talking about? Will you go away, will you? These fellas know what they're doing.
Yeah.
She goes, I'm telling you. So I said, right, whatever. And I walked off, and I never thought anything of it. And it was obviously, it didn't get fixed. It was never the same. I was never the same. And when I thought back about that, I was like, I can't believe it. So initially I started learning. I became a PT, trying to fix myself, because I still thought I could get back. So I came down to London and I studied PT. I was 30 at the time, and I still thought, I think I could still play now if I had a working hamstring.
Yeah.
But I was 30 and I could still do stuff. And I thought, if I fix this thing, I'll get back. So I spent a load of money trying to go to different physios, blah, 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 blah. And I went to this one fella. So I did my PT course, and I thought, right, I'm just going to train it and I'm going to get back. I went to this fella, Kevin Lidlow, who looks after everyone. He said, look, that muscle is actually not attached. He said, that pulled off. It's called an avulsion, and you have to fix it within a year. If you don't reattach it within a year, the sort of tendons solidify, and it's like burning plastic, right? The way plastic goes if you burn it. it'll never reattach properly. He said, so that's basically what happens. So you're never going to get back. I was like, flipping hell. He said, you just got to manage it now. You just got to do what you can do and manage it and just live through it. So that was sort of hard to take, you know, and you sort of, I realized at that point I got very depressed. Now when I think about it, I got very depressed. I was probably depressed for about 2 years because the person who we are is dead. You know, if you read the book Retired, great book about retired footballers and all the stories of things that happen to different footballers when they retire. The person dies, you know, you are, the footballer,
your identity.
There you go. The death of your identity. So I realized I was depressed for a while, and I thought, right, I can't sit like this. I need to learn more, and I need to now prevent this happening to anyone else. So that's what I sort of dedicate myself to, is dedicating and helping young guys and girls not live that life of, I shoulda, woulda, coulda, you know, because you don't want to be that guy, in the pub, you know, well, I used to play for them, you know, and until I had an injury.
Like Martin.
Yeah.
I used to play for Hendon.
Yeah.
But that's real, you know, that is a real thing. People get injured and they're never the same. You know, so I think people need to start taking a bit more notice when young people are saying, look, I'm injured or this and that, and I'm feeling this, and they're palming it off saying, yeah, you probably weren't that good, you know, because you never know who someone could have been after 10 years of consistent training without injury, you know. But that's what I do, you know. I look after, you know, all these guys that are trying to be heroes, you know, and I'm trying to help them get there.
Yeah. And what ages are you approaching? Like, would you approach that from them with players? Like, you know, because you think of like academies now bringing in kids 7, 8 years old, then puberty hits and you have growing pains, things like that. So how do you balance that as a strength and conditioning kind of person then to analyze a young athlete basically and guide them? Because you see parents who are obviously pushing and think their kid's going to be the next Ronaldo or whatever, and you see Ronaldo's son is in fantastic condition if you see him on Instagram. How do you balance that and the age? I'm very interested to know about that.
So it's very funny that parents think more is better, right? So there's that age period where kids grow really fast, as you said, right? It's called peak height velocity, right? Now, I literally just had a young lad there. He's been at Arsenal and he's had a load of injuries because he's been pushing to do as much as he can, and he has little niggles. There's little areas where he's struggling because he's growing real fast. And at that age, that peak height velocity age, which for boys is about between 14 and 15, right? They usually take a big jump. And what you do is you actually decrease the training load, believe it or not, right? So you'll still do their technical stuff. You'll still have them lifting. You'll decrease the load. So you might not go that heavy, but you'll work. So in terms of strength and conditioning, you'll work on range of movement and coordination and stability, right? So you'll do a lot of stability work, a lot of proprioception, right? You'll do a little bit of plyometric stuff to keep that power. You do not do laps and laps and laps and laps at 15, 14, 15 with these fellas. They don't need that, right? It's too much for them, right? Now, so from 6 all the way up to 13, right? You'll have them doing a wide variety of stuff. So my mate there, John Connor, he was only over with me for the weekend. So he was over doing George Groves' podcast this morning. But so I learned most of my stuff off him. He used to teach for a fella called Charles Poliquin, who is literally the don when it comes to strength training, all levels of athletes, right? He was great. But anyway, he actually gave me Istvan Bally's book. So that's how I learned all this stuff. So at the start, you train to train. This is Istvan Bally's. The first phase is fundamentals, F-U-N, fundamentals. So fundamentals, that's moving. Learn how to move, squat, hip hinge, jump, catch, throw, all that type of stuff. Then you move into train to train. Then you go from train to compete, and then train to win. All right. And that process can be 10 to 12 years. Yeah. Right. And the train to win is actually, Bally has it at about 18, 19. So up until they're about 17, 18, 19, you're not even trying to win. You're just trying to give these kids development training to build their body to be robust, excuse me, to then then you start working the mentality of winning at about 17, 18. Now, look, I'm not saying don't compete and don't have competition, but winning isn't everything at the younger ages. You know, you save that crazy winning attitude and the mad mentality stuff to later. You know, get them competing with each other and themselves, yeah, grand. But it's not everything. Development is everything. You know, because you want these guys to play till they're 35, 40. Mm. You know, you don't want them to kill themselves doing all they can and running through walls. And by 22, they're all over shop. Like, you know, there's a couple of players that have been at clubs that by 25, they're starting to get niggles. 26, they're picking up, and I don't want to name any names because I'll get done, but there's loads. We all know them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And these fellas are doing too much. They're being overloaded, trying to be the next best thing and trying to do too much of the fitness stuff, not understanding that there's ways of doing it, you know.
Yeah, there's probably plenty of time to develop. Like, really, that I think that's the mindset that probably parents have to understand as well, that there is lots of time. Because I know you're not naming it, but like, you think of the likes of Michael Owen when he broke through and then he really had terrible injuries. Then later on, he was never the same player then afterwards. And he says that himself when he was at Newcastle, and even I think it was Stoke in the end, wasn't he? He just couldn't do it anymore.
Look at James McCarthy. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, you might, did you play against James McCarthy up in Scotland, Richie? Because he was only about 14, 15. Like, is like, obviously he was very talented, and I think he came around the same time as James McArthur, but is that a little bit mad, you know, to get a guy that age, young lad, child really, playing senior football for their development? Because if you look at him now, like, I mean, he's only, what's James McCarthy, 32, 33, and he's been crocked for years.
Yeah, what I would have done is I would have dipped him in and out.
Yeah.
Had him in the first team the whole time. And it's a bit like if you listen to some of the guys that talk about jiu-jitsu, right? You look at the way they talk about training. So the elite of the elite guys, right? There's a fella, what's his bleeding name? Anyway, this fella only eats once a day. He's a mad thing, right? Little skinny fella, doesn't do any weights, just does jiu-jitsu. But he's amazing, right? He's a world champion. He's world champion in a load of different weights. Anyway, what he does is he's a black belt, right? But he doesn't train with our black belts. He trains with 2 levels below. Yeah. And then he goes and competes against black belts, right? So I sort of bring that into my own football side. I'm like, right, well, a young lad like that's good enough to play in the first team. Maybe you're playing for 1 or 2 games and say, right, go back into the young lads, the 21s or whatever, and work on this and this and this. Enjoy that for a few weeks and then bring them back in. You know, play 1 or 2 games, go back out, work on this, this, and this, and you're not overloading them mentally and physically. Because look, I don't care what anyone says, first team men's football is a different story to any other football. You can play as many 21s games as you want, as many reserve games, as many under 18 cup finals and all that. A men's game that's serious, that people are getting paid big money for, is different to anything you'll ever do. Right? So as a 17-year-old, going and playing in that, it's quite a lot to deal with. You know, I didn't do it. I was 19, I think, when I made my debut, 19 or 20 when I made my debut. So I was a bit older. And I'd done a lot and I'd gone through it. So it wasn't that big of a thing for me. But I imagine if I had been 17, I wouldn't have been able for it mentally. Now, some people, you know, mentally they have the capacity for it. Like Wayne Rooney, you know, because he was just so good. But he had the body for it. Yeah. So he had one of them bodies that he could deal with men physically. And he could play multiple games. Some people can't do that. And it's emotionally taxing as well. You know, so people forget the emotion that happens in a football game. You know, you're up, you lose, you're back down here, you win, you're up, you're back down. Look at the English players after they lost the World Cup final. Every one of them did that.
Yeah, it was great.
You know, or not the World Cup, the Euro Championship final. You know?
Yeah.
But these are the things that happen. And then it takes them a bit of time to come back up. Look at Rashford now. It's taken him a few months. But he's now coming back from it. Do you know what I mean? So you have to take all that into account. And these are things that I would think about if I was looking after a young player going into a first team.
What about someone like Evan Ferguson then? Because, I mean, look, he was 14 playing for Bows. And look, that was a situation, I suppose, where he did dip in and out. Like, I think he only played a couple of preseason games and one or 2 games. I mean, don't be too critical of Bows, Richie. Don't be too critical of Bows. but where would you see that? Because, I mean, what was he, 17 making his Premier League debut? He's 18 now. He's had an injury already. I mean, it was kind of, you know, it was kind of inflicted on him, wasn't it? But What would
I
your
didn't see
take
the
be on
injury.
him?
What is it? What has he got?
So Fabinho kind of came in, kind of raked his
Achilles, didn't he?
Achilles, yeah. So I think it was more kind of
Okay. So it was
ligament
an impact
issues.
injury.
Yeah. Now he's back now. He was, what was it, 2 weeks, Martin, or something along those lines. He was out for 2 weeks. But again, a guy that young, like, what would your view be on him?
Look, my view usually in football is if you're good enough, play, you know, but it's hard to say because everyone's different. You just got to know the person, know the player. And you got to have, we were just talking actually last night, me and my mate, we were talking about in terms of football, how do you manage train and load and how do you manage overtraining in athletes, no matter what sport they're doing. So he's looking after the UFC lads. And he wants to take maybe some stuff from football and maybe bring it across and maybe the other way. Because you know when the UFC lads go through a weight cut. So if you go through a weight cut, so you're training all for whatever, 12 weeks, you're going to be here. You go to the weight cut, you drop right down. So your readiness to fight drops right down. You rehydrate and it's basically a race who can get back to as close to 100% before the fight, right? But you're never going to get to 100%. So how do you measure where a person is, where an athlete is prior to competition? And that's what I think you have to sort of do with football. We have to find ways of measuring these athletes and saying, right, you played 3 games in 6 days. You're not ready to play again. You personally. Right, next one. James Milner. He can play 10 games in a row with that fella and he'd be grand. You know, Daniel Sturridge, you know, could he play 3 games, bang, bang, bang? I don't know. Do you know? So you sort of have to look at it individually because it is very individual. Each position is individual, and each player has individual genetics and then characteristics. So there has to be a way of finding how we measure each person specifically for regular games. You know.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you're saying that, you know, because I used to always think of, like, you're talking about the players and their, you know, capabilities and what challenges they're given on their own body and the impact of it. Like, you know, I was thinking like someone like Martial at Man United, he can't cope with regular games. But, you know, our old understanding of strength and conditioning and pre-season training was then to kind of peak for kind of cup games and league games. But now it's actually tailored around individuals, isn't it? Availability for them and when their body's going to be ready. And that's a massive challenge. I mean, how do you keep all that data as well? You know, I know they have trackers and everything. I don't know how. It must be just management systems, is it? Like, I'm lucky. I go to near Cheshunt, near where I live. I see a lot of the Tottenham girls, underage girls. They train up there, and they all have the trackers on their boots and stuff. I watch a lot of their training sessions and see them play. But I just don't understand how the data gets analysed, and just must be constant.
Yeah, there's data analysts that look at all the training loads. The sports scientist does all that. They look at what's going on, where each player is, in terms of distances. They have their sprint distance, they'll have their high intensity run, and then they'll have their normal running, and then they'll have their total distances covered. So you know, I was looking after a fella that's playing the championship yesterday. So he came down, I did an assessment with him, and then John, my mate, who looks after all the boys, he works in the ISI, Irish Strength Institute in Dublin. So they have 2 or 3 gyms there. So he did an ART assessment on him, or treatment on him. So we released a fair bit of stuff on him. But the young fella was saying, says, yeah, you know, the other day I did 6.5K in the session. So he's coming back from injury. So what's happening is each player is measured in terms of total distance and then the volumes of sprints they're doing. And what they do is they measure the players. This is another thing where it's a little bit funny. They're measuring the players' max speed and they're saying, right, your max speed is, say, whatever, 12 miles an hour, right? So your max speed is 12 miles an hour. So if you're in the red, which is 11 miles an hour for you, if you're in that too long, it's probably not good. But they're not realizing that a fella that's 12 miles an hour might be an averagely paced, low to average pace fella. There might be a fella that's doing 16 miles an hour. That's his max. Now, if he stays in his 90, that is a massive amount of speed.
Yeah.
Where the other fella whose max is only 12, he may be able to do them runs for a lot longer because it's not as fast. Do you know what I mean? So he's less likely to pull a muscle. And that's where you got to start realizing the differences. That someone who's slow can run more at their higher intensity paces. Do you know what I mean? Than some absolute speed merchant who could probably only manage 4 of them runs. Anymore, he's going to pop something.
Yeah.
You know, so that's where it gets very dicey because it's tough. It's tough to. There's no way of knowing who's going to pull a muscle at what point.
It's so individual, isn't it? It's literally so individual.
I think it's fascinating as well, the evolution of this. Like my first kind of ever really kind of hearing about like these stats and this analysis was like, I think it was kind of made in jest with like Benny McCarthy. I think it was Blackburn with Sam Allardyce. His sprints were noted really good, but he used to sprint for corners. When he was taking a corner, right, he'd sprint over to do that because he used to fiddle the kind of records so that that's what he used to do because he was really lazy. He was known as being lazy, but then they went, actually, his stats are really good. He used to just sprint to go and get the ball to take a corner. And he was like fiddling it that way.
Wow.
That was really good. I heard that on a podcast. It was brilliant. Like, it's absolutely
brilliant.
So yeah, it is open to kind of probably a manipulation a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it's fascinating and it's amazing young players coming in to that, you know, like certainly, you know, kids coming through to playing for fun, of course, which is the right idea, of course. We've spoken to a lot of coaches in academies and stuff involved in the Irish setup as well down at Wexford Youth. Spoke to Mark Ross recently. How do you deal with working with young people though when you're trying to explain to them their body and the changes they're going through and that they have to really mind themselves, and yet, you know, technically they want to get better, they want to be in the mindset of the manager. You know, it used to be kind of perceived as kind of weakness if you had a niggle and an injury and you had to miss a session. How are you able to deal with, you know, getting that mindset to the young players, especially that, you know, you've got to really look after yourselves, basically?
Yeah, that's a tough thing. And parents are the ones you have to coach, which sounds a bit mad, but it's the parents that you coach. So the parents come in here, if I showed you the gym, we've an assessment room and all that. So I bring the parents in and I bring them through the first couple of sessions. And I sit down and said, look, this fella or girl, they're being overloaded. This is what's going on with them. This is what they have to do. So this person, this young player has to do these type of exercises regularly and has to ease off this stuff regularly. You know, so this fella, pulling my hair out, this fella today, I had to say to him, look, you're doing too much. How do you think that injury happens? It happens. It's a growth plate injury, which for young guys happens from repetitive strain, repetitive high force strain. You don't do that with me in the gym, you know. So I have to, the training we're doing is try and build that and build the thickness in his tendons, right? So you have to educate the kid, but it's more so the parents. So I've had to say to his man, look, he's doing a bit too much. So I'll text his man and say, look, he's doing a bit much. Bring the volume down. So take him out of a couple of days because he does like stuff 6 days a week. You know, the kid is unbelievable. He can pass with both feet. He can dribble. He can slip balls in. He can ping balls. The young fella is unbelievable, right? But if you keep flogging him, it doesn't matter how good he's going to be because he won't be able to run.
Yeah,
you know, so
break down there.
Yeah, so that's what you have to. You have to. My sort of approach is train the parents, and then the rest will filter down. You know, give the kids the information, but you train the parents.
Yeah, definitely. I find that even with I coach very, you know, kids level under 11 team, my son's team and stuff, and basically, yeah, the whole interaction is the parents are the ones you've got to be more involved in and communicating with more than the lads. They just want to play and have fun.
Yeah,
it's more, you know, getting across to the parents what they want to do and the ambition of parents, and that's just it, isn't it? Though, you know, they've all got Instagram profiles now at certain levels, academies. One-to-one training was really pushed in lockdown. Spoke to like Larry Mahoney, who does a lot of stuff with the FAI.
Larry was at Rovers. Larry actually told me, if you don't start getting strong, that's what he said to me. He said, imagine how fast and strong you'd be if you start training with weights. That was Larry. Unbelievable, Larry was.
What was his mantra? Let the players play.
Yeah.
Is
that what he said? Yeah, let the players play.
That's his book. Yeah,
that's it. Brilliant book. Really, really good as well.
Is it?
So yeah, very good. I like looking at 7, 8-year-olds, 9, 10s, then stuff like that. So very young and just let the players play. But we had him on the podcast. Fantastic. Yeah, real good insight into it all.
Larry's hilarious as well. Yeah. Great guy.
He said you were the greatest. He said you were the greatest player he's ever produced, Richie. The greatest.
Better believe it. Believe it.
And he also said you were the best left back to play for Oldham since Dennis Irwin. Irish left back.
He's a fan of the pod, actually, so we have to give him a shout out now. So that's brilliant that you know him. And but like, what would be, You know, you're saying about weights and stuff like that. Like, you know, just that. What age would you introduce that then into young, like what young footballers? Because not to go off tack with that, but I read Mick Clegg's book. He's a strength and conditioning fella. He was brought in. That's the first time Man United brought in a strength and conditioning coach. Ferguson wasn't really massively into it, but they trialed it with the under 18s. I think with Brian McClare might have been there as a coach at that time. And then they evolved it into the team. And, you know, I think even in the book, you know, Ronaldo credits his sculptured frame as Mick Clegg made me into this, just getting that mindset around to him. And what was interesting as well, when he worked with Roy Keane on recoveries, how he did the boxing sessions. He brought different sports into it, multidiscipline sports, of course. Yeah. So what age, though, again, back to the original question, I suppose, what age would you start bringing kind of weights into a young athlete's kind of sporting life and development?
I think you can bring it in at any age. Those kids 5 and 6 lifting weights. You know, what your main goal when people are young is not the goal to lift 100 kilos when you're 7 years old, right? The main goal is to teach them movements and to be strong in long positions, right? So if you think, this is another thing, right? I was talking to one of the girls here the other day. She says, "Oh, I'm going down to this place called Stretch Lab." Right, so it's a place where you go and you just stretch it, right? I was thinking to myself, so what? I said, well, they just stretch it. Don't do anything else. You don't do a warm-up before. No, just stretch it. Bing, bang, bang, gone. I thought, okay. And that's fine for the average Joe. But if you were to do that to, say, Linford Christie or Usain Bolt or one of these fast guys, so all of a sudden, you're stretching, their leg is going from there to now it's there. That's a new amount of availability. So new availability of range of motion, right? So they can move further. Now, have they trained in that new range of motion? Are they strong there? So imagine when you're sprinting, right? And your leg, as your front leg, your lead leg goes through the swing phase, prepares for the stance phase, it sort of stops at a long range, right? It's nearly fully extended, the knee is, right? So you now have an extra inch where that knee is extended, right? An extra bit of flexibility. And you're not strong in that. And think of the force that these guys put through the hamstrings when they're sprinting. If you haven't trained in that length, you're going to pop that muscle, right? So think back to the kids. So what your aim is to get kids lifting through large ranges of motion, weights, and they don't have to be heavy. So you're trying to train them technical movements so that their brain understands how to co-contract. So if you get anyone that ever remember Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator, when he grabbed your man's hand and they shook hands and the two of them are, you know, they're grabbing hands like that, and you see his bicep. But when you look at his bicep is on, right? So it's a big thing here. Look at the bottom, that's on as well. When any muscle pulls, so the bicep is easy. So if the bicep pulls, right, that activates. The tricep also has to activate, because if it didn't co-contract, that thing there, that elbow joint to come away, it'll come off. So yeah, that's called coordination, right? So your muscles have to actually learn to coordinate, and that's what lifting weights does. It teaches your brain to send messages to muscles on both sides of joints to co-coordinate, all right, to coordinate, all right, and you're strengthening in long positions. And also you want to strengthen tendons, right? Because tendons, obviously, they connect the muscle to the bone, and that tends, if they pop, they're the worst injuries to have. All right, so there's a load of sort of benefits to strength training, and it's not just I lift heavy weights. There's a whole load of things that go on. There's a lot of neural adaptation that happens that enables you to do better stuff on the ball, to be stronger when you come into contact with someone, because you're getting that co-contraction of, you know, core stiffness, glute activation, quad and hamstring activation, stabilizing joints, so that when you hit someone, you know, they bounce. Or when you strike through a ball, your whole body is stiff and you get more power going through the ball. Do you know what I mean? So you're training that more than just for the sake of it, for the sake of lifting heavy weights.
Yeah, you know your stuff, Richie. You know your stuff, and I mean,
I hope so.
you can see why Arsenal have picked you up. I mean, would you ever do anything with Ireland? Like, have you ever been approached by the FAI or because I mean, you've a UEFA B license as well, so you're a fairly versatile guy. Has that ever come on your radar?
Well, I've never been asked, and the thing is, I don't think anyone knows that I know a bit of stuff. Unfortunately, I don't advertise what I know that well. So that's something that I'm trying to improve on. So I'm trying to improve on the fact that letting people know, look, this is what I do. I've played football at an all right level, and I sort of know what it takes to survive the game now. And that's what it is. It's survival. How do you get through the sessions and the games and still be able to play the next game? Because it's getting harder and harder to run faster and faster each game, each season. There's more work being required. There's more games. And, it's more important to win. The money is mad.
Yeah.
So I just need to start promoting myself more and start working more with the top guys, like at Arsenal, like I'm just in the door now. So who knows what'll happen in a while, in a few months, in a few years. You never know, but it might not be with Arsenal. I'm setting my own thing up as well. So I have my own bits and bobs that I have going on. And I will be moving more into that where I'll have my own team because I'm part-time at Arsenal. I'm not full-time in there. So I have my own setup here. And there are things in the future where I'm looking to get set up with my own space and basically an academy. It's on the way. So I have a 5-year plan, and I expect to have an academy where I bring guys in, males and females, boys and girls. They come in and they say, right, a little bit the way it is with the Ireland rugby thing. When I go through this, I'm going to come out the end ready for the Premier League. I should be able to survive Premier League football.
Yeah. Well, Richie, I think watch this space, because as I said, you know your stuff, you're having great success, and we really look forward to seeing what the future holds. So look, thanks so much for coming on the show. And
thanks very much.
As I said, we learned a lot today. Every day is a school day, isn't it? But that was
there you go.
Geez, I feel like hitting the gym now.
That's the idea.
Yeah, as I go to the fridge and take out last night's Chinese. So look, Richie, it was an absolute pleasure, and we wish you all the best for the future.
Thanks very much, lads. Listen, take care. Nice one. Thanks for having me on, and I'll chat to you again.